Hello and welcome to this video, the Cisco Secure Firewall Release 7 Snort 3 overview. The goal here is to give you a good overview of the changes that came in Release 7 when it comes to Snort 3. So it's not going to cover everything that changed in Release 7, but just Snort 3 centric features. So my first slide here, let's just talk about what happens when you upgrade. So this is what happens when you upgrade a device to version 7. So you have a couple rows there. One for upgrade, one for base install, and the columns for FMC managed and locally, or FDM, the Firepower Device Manager managed devices. So if you upgrade an FMC managed device, you're going to maintain the Snort version you had before, which was Snort 2, because this is the first time Snort 3 has been offered. So we're not going to automatically upgrade the Snort engine when you upgrade an FMC managed device. Now a locally managed device, again, the FDM managed devices, because you could have installed Snort 3 previously in version 6.7, it will maintain whatever that version is. So if it was Snort 3 before, it will still be Snort 3. If it was Snort 2, it will remain Snort 2. So we're not going to change anything there. When it comes to a base installation, if you install a new Release 7 device, it will default to the Snort 3 detection engine. And this applies to either the FMC managed or a locally managed device. Let's talk about Snort 3 policy relationships. So when it comes to the access control, network discovery, malware, and file policies, nothing has changed. Whether you're using Snort 2 or Snort 3, you won't see any difference in the way those policies are configured, the way you select policies, or any of the settings there. However, when it comes to intrusion policy, there are some changes. So there's still one intrusion policy. Every time you create a new policy, you get one, but now there'll be two versions of that policy. When you upgrade, any policies you had previously existing, you'll have the same number of policies you had, but now you'll have a Snort 2 and Snort 3 version of that policy. So for network analysis policy, it's the same. You will have two versions. If you had network analysis policies previously, you'll now have a Snort 2 and a Snort 3 version. If you have previously customized your network analysis policy, those customizations will not be migrated. The settings in your new Snort 3 network analysis policy will be inherited from your base policy configuration. The device will dictate the version of the intrusion policy and the network analysis policy that it receives. So again, we're going to have dual versions of all these policies, both of these policies. So at deploy time, the FMC will determine based on what the device is running, which version of the policy it gets. And this is what that looks like. So I've got an FMC on the left that's running version 7. It was upgraded from a previous version. And on the right, you can see there are three devices. So I've got a version 7 device that's running the Snort 2 engine, a version 7 device running Snort 3, and I've got a version 661 device. Now those are only going to run Snort 2. So what happens is, if I have a single access control policy, I call it my main access control policy, and I've got that assigned or deployed to those three different devices, when I deploy that policy, the FMC is going to deploy the appropriate Snort policy based on the Snort version. So you can see the top and the bottom devices there get the Snort 2 policy, but the middle one gets the Snort 3 policy. And that makes sense. I mean, no surprises there. But what I want to illustrate there, and the reason I mentioned it is, if you have a single access control policy, then you probably have a single kind of philosophy on how you want things protected out there, right? And you only have a selection for one intrusion policy, but it comes in two versions. It behooves you then to make sure that those are the same, because once we have two versions of this policy, those are independently maintained. You can actually go enable or disable rules in the Snort 2 versus the Snort 3 policy, and they will not be automatically synchronized. You want to make sure that if you do this for some period of time, or you have two different Snort engines out there, especially if you have the same access control policy, to make sure those two Snort policies, the Snort 2 and Snort 3, have the same rules enabled and disabled, so you get the same level of protection on your devices, whether they're Snort 2 or Snort 3. For our Snort 3 intrusion policy, these are some of the changes. So Snort 3 includes rule states only. So that policy really strictly just rule states now, whether the rules enabled, disabled, set to block, set to alert. The global threshold and sensitive data configurations have been removed from the intrusion policy. The syslog settings have been moved through the access control policy. So there was a syslog setting previously, that's now in access control. There are no more policy layers, so you won't find policy layers in Snort 3, it's all one monolithic policy. There are new rule groups. Now the rule groups are close to the categories that are pre-existing already in Snort 2, but they are new. There's fewer groups, and they work a little differently than they did in Snort 2, which I'll mention here in a second. Those rule groups I just mentioned, those are customizable. They have customizable group security levels, and we'll talk about that in other videos, so I'm just going to skim over that today. But the idea is you can actually set the security levels on a group basis, not just on a policy basis. So that's pretty exciting, and again, we'll see that in a future video. Suppression and thresholding is now no longer in the policy. That has been moved to the objects menu. So you have an objects intrusion rules menu where you'll find Snort 3 rules. That's where you will configure any suppressions or thresholds. And I already mentioned policy synchronization a little bit, but when you do upgrade from a previous version to version 7, any rule states in your previous Snort 2 policies are going to be migrated to that new Snort 3 policy. So anything you've done, any manual changes you've done, whatever your base policy is, things like that, those all get migrated to Snort 3. So initially, after the upgrade, your 2 policy versions, 2 and 3, should be the same as far as which rules are enabled. When it comes to the network analysis policy, that has changed quite a bit. That is now a JSON-based text configuration. There's no migration of settings from existing Snort 2 NAPs. So if you have a network analysis policy, you've created or configured custom ones in Snort 2, those will still exist, and there will be Snort 3 versions of those. However, the Snort 3 version will not have any customizations brought over from Snort 2. It will only include the settings from the base policy. Let's take a quick 10,000 foot look at the changes that have occurred on the FMC in this release regarding Snort 3. So I'm just going to start here from the dashboard. You'll find policies are in the same place, so policies intrusion will go there first. Now for intrusion policies, as I mentioned, if there were 2 policies before the migration, you'll still have 2 policies, and here you can see I have a balanced and a secure IPS policy here. On the right, you'll see though there are different buttons now. There's a Snort 2 and a Snort 3 link to edit those policies. Clicking on one of these links on the right will edit the appropriate version of the policy. I'm not going to click on the Snort 2 version because that looks the same as the Snort 2 version did before. But click on Snort 3 here though, you can see I'm loading the policy. And I just want to mention I'm not fast forwarding this video. This policy loads as fast as you just saw it. And it's because of the way the API is used to manage this policy now. You can expect this policy to load much faster than the Snort 2 version. So in here we have the rule groups on the left, which again are new, and we'll talk about how those are used in another video. The rules are listed on the right. You have the filter bar where you can search. Expanding one of the rules will give you the options in the rule. So if I try this app detect rule and expand it, you can see the Snort 3 version of the rule there. From the same page, we can also go to the network analysis. So previously that was kind of a quick link up on the right. Now this is a tab, so if I click this tab here, that'll take me to the network analysis policies. I only had one previously, I still have it. And again, remember those customizations that you did, those won't be here. This will just be based on the base policy, secure over connectivity in this case. And but no customizations will be carried over from Snort 2. Now I mentioned that you won't find syslog in the intrusion policy anymore with one of the things, so I want to show you where that is real quickly. So if we'll go up to policies, access control, I have an access control policy here on the top I've called basic. So if I just take a quick look at that, on the logging tab now, there's a new checkbox for IPS settings. So this is where you would enable syslog for your IPS events. This will actually work for previous versions as well. So even if you have older devices you're managing, if you want to turn syslog on for your intrusion policies, you can do that here. Now the setting within the policy for those older versions will still take precedence, but you can still use this if you don't have anything configured in your policy. You can turn on syslog from here, and of course in release 7 this is the only place you can enable syslog for your intrusion rules. One other place I want to show you is under Objects. So if I go up to Objects and Intrusion Rules. So we have 2 tabs now for Intrusion Rules, Snort 2 and Snort 3. If I click on Snort 3 All Rules. Looks real similar to the policy. We have the rule groups on the left, rules on the right. This is where you would come if you wanted to configure suppressions or thresholds on a rule. And there's under the alert configuration there on the right. Underneath that you'll find links. Clicking on one of those will allow you to configure the suppressions or thresholds. We have another video on that, so I'm not going to dive into exactly how to do that from here. That's a quick overview of the new Snort 3 UI and some of the new features. Be sure to check the YouTube channel for more information on the Secure Firewall Release 7 and Snort 3. As always, thank you very much and happy snorting!